So that evening, we leave the deposition at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. My last text to him was probably the text saying that I'll help you for free, was probably around like 8 p.m. I get home in the evening and I log into Facebook, and all I see is rest in peace, individual's name, all over Facebook.
What are you talking about?
He committed suicide on campus. He got a gun in his car, he sat there, and he shot himself in the mouth.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jon Marko, and welcome to another exciting episode of Cases Gone Wild. And I'm really excited about today's episode, which, reminder, this is brought to you by Marko Law. Please, if you like this podcast, please come and follow us. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with whoever so they can enjoy it as well. Today, I'm happy to have my good friend, great attorney here, Manny Chahal, who I've had the honor, and we're going to talk about. We share a case gone wild in common, which we're going to talk about today, but a little bit about Mr. Chahal, or Mr. Manny, as I always introduce you in trial, Mr. Manny. Mr. Manny was born in Toronto. He's Canadian. Originally, his family is from India. He went to Brampton High School, which is in Toronto. For those of us, we're not going to know anywhere that he went to school unless you're Canadian, because he also went to college in Ontario, went to Western College. And then he decided he wanted to become a lawyer, and he went to law school here in America, in the Detroit area at Cooley Law School. And he has a diverse practice. So what's great about Manny, you do all kinds of stuff, don't you? Do business, you focus on business. You have a lot of contractual stuff. And so our practices are very different, right? I mean, where, you occasionally get a personal injury case or whatever, but tell us, Manny, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So first of all, thanks for having me on, Jon.
Thanks for being here.
It's truly an honor, man. I've seen the first few episodes you've done, and I've seen the caliber of attorneys you have on this show, so I'm truly honored. Thanks again. As far as my practice goes, I've been practicing for about 8 years now. The first 2-3 years, I kind of dabbled in family law, criminal defense.
Finding your way.
Finding my way. Eventually, I got tied up with having simply one client who I've been working for exclusively for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years. It's a large corporation. They have about 2,500 employees across North America. So I'm essentially outside counsel for this company. And it's essentially corporate law, commercial real estate. And so, whatever the day-to-day legal issues that come up, I usually handle those. And I, outsource, I hire attorneys in other states and so forth. So I'm exclusively tied to one client at this time.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So, and things are going well. I can tell. I see you popping bottles, and I know you're getting married.
I am getting
in the
married.
Fall. Thank you for the invite to the wedding. I hope inviting you on the show didn't make you feel forced to invite me to your beautiful wedding.
No, that invitation I think came before this this show happening.
But I think things are good.
Things are good. Yeah.
Having one client is a blessing, and it's also can be a curse, because if something goes wrong, or if you don't do what your client wants, that's dangerous.
It is dangerous. It definitely is dangerous. But you kind of don't think of it that way.
Yeah, you have to adapt, and
you try to do the best job that you can. And I've had a long-term relationship with the client, and because you're not working for different clients, you don't have multiple files. You're kind of focused every single day on the same client, the same type of work. There's both sides.
There's
to it.
pros and cons to it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Why did you become a lawyer, Manny? You were born in Toronto, right? You're here. You're moving to the United States, I understand.
Yeah. So the reason for that was, there's two parts to it. One, we took a high school trip in 9th grade to a courthouse, and I got the opportunity to hear a judge, give us just a little presentation, discussion, question and answer period type thing. And it really, sunk in. It's just something I wanted to do since that day. And the other reason, which is a funnier reason, is I went to a small private Christian school in Brampton. It's called Brampton Christian Academy. And we had a very tight-knit circle of friends. You know, our high school maybe had 150 kids in it. So everybody knew each other on a first-name basis.
Yeah.
All of my friends whom I'm still connected with today, you know, since day one, they all wanted to go to med school and become doctors. And I kind of figured, you know, having a whole group of doctor friends, they're going to need a lawyer, right? So that partly had something to do with it. I did not want to pursue a medical education. And, you know, so I kind of just chose my path back early then.
And have they needed a lawyer? Have they needed you since that time?
Because they're in Canada, most of them, I mean, they always call me for legal advice.
Yeah.
I try to guide them as best I can, but, you know, they have needed lawyers.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Well, it's funny, you know, how those like little experiences when we're younger shape who we are and what we become,
Of course.
Just meeting that judge and having that experience. Yep. You know, I think a lot of us out here have had certain experiences in our life that if we're lawyers, doctors, whatever you are, that has, you know, set our path. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for being on the show today. And I know we got a lot to talk about. When, you know, I was trying to think, when did we first meet? Did we meet before the first case that we did together?
I believe we met on one occasion. Obviously, you had a guest. I think it was your second episode, Issa Haddad, who's the gentleman that I work for. He's the attorney I work for at his firm. You guys are connected through, you know, you talked about a little bit of how your relationship with him came forward through his wife. You guys went to the same college, right? So I think we attended a buck dinner together once.
Yeah.
But
like
other
a
than
lawyer
that,
event.
Yeah, it was a lawyer event. But other than that, I think we really got connected once, you know, I reached out to you regarding the case we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it. So this is Case Gone Wild.
This
was a wild case.
It really was.
This was a wild case. And I remember you called me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just like I tell my clients, nobody calls me because things are going well.
Right.
Right. Like people call me because something horrible's happening or they need help.
Right.
And that goes for lawyers too. And so why don't you tell the listeners, you know, why and how did you end up calling me on the Case Gone Wild that we're going to talk about?
Sure, absolutely. So around January 2017, that would have been maybe a year and a half into me practicing, I get a call from the client that we're going to talk about. Elderly lady crossing the street in Canton, Michigan, walking in a residential neighborhood, gets struck by a car while crossing the street. She had a lawyer at the time, but the family was Indian. They're from the same part of India that I'm from. They speak Punjabi, so I'm from the state of Punjab in India. And so a lot of the community in general in Michigan, I've come to learn, you know, they feel more comfortable just communicating in their own language with someone who's from the same background. So perhaps that was the reason that they had reached out to me. They weren't too happy with the lawyer that was working on the case. He had filed suit maybe like 3-4 months prior. So they reached out. I had a consultation with them, and I just felt so bad for this elderly lady and her family. And I said, you know, with the seniors that I work with at the firm, I'm just like, guys, I have to take this case. Zero experience in personal injury law.
Never did a personal injury case.
First and I'm not going to say first and last, but that was the first personal injury case I ever took on. Zero idea on what to do. So I get connected with.
And it's a pretty substantial case.
Yeah, it's
just so our listeners understand. I mean,
multi-million-dollar case.
Yeah, you have a case where, you know, somebody gets a boo-boo on their wrist or something. Yep. You know, there's not a lot of risk there, but this lady was walking across the street and was smashed into by a vehicle, catastrophically disabling injuries, with a lot of insurance coverage, millions in insurance coverage.
Yep.
This was I would say, an upper level case, a high risk, high potential case,
a high cost case,
cost case.
Right. So they approached me in January. I took the case on, and I was introduced through a colleague to a former attorney, I'll call him, who had significant experience in personal injuries. So
you're out there looking for some guidance.
Exactly.
Because you haven't done a case like this before.
And
which is good. And there's no shame in you know.
No. I was full in. I was like, no matter what it takes, you know, I'm going to work day and night So I hired essentially a consultant to help me out, to kind of guide me through, my first deposition for a personal injury case.
Yeah.
Like I went to go depose police officers who were at the scene of this accident. That was my very first deposition. Never done a deposition before. And I remember preparing for that with this consultant, literally like writing questions down on how to do a personal injury deposition.
Because it's your first deposition you've ever done.
Exactly.
And now you're on a multi-million-dollar potentially case.
Exactly.
And just so people who are listening, this was, when you hear an old lady was walking across the street and got hit by a car,
right,
you might say, well, that's easy. What's the complicated in that? Any lawyer could do that. But this wasn't that case.
No, this was not that case.
Why?
So for starters, to make a long story short, and we'll get into the details, more details of it, obviously. We went to trial on this case in November last year, right? When we won on the no fault trial, at the no fault trial. The insurance, first of all, there's two issues. There was two insurance carriers involved. The elderly lady, she lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and then also in Canton, Michigan. She spent her time with two of her sons half and half, right?
Yeah, so she sold her house.
Right.
She didn't have her own house anymore, and
right.
she just lived with her family.
Yep.
Half here, half in Canada.
Yep.
But what does that have to do? The listener might be saying, well, what does that have to do with the case? Who cares where she lives?
Right. So going to one of the two issues that, the insurance companies, both of them were, using as defenses was, so there's something that I've now come to learn called order of priority, right? When you're hurt in an automobile accident, there's an order of priority as to who has to pay.
Who has to pay first,
exactly.
Right?
So,
and it's not as easy as it sounds.
No,
because these insurance companies don't want to pay.
They don't want to pay, and
they want someone else to pay, right? And that's exactly what happened here, right?
Yes,
we had you had two insurance companies. One was AAA insurance,
mm-hmm.
and one was Citizens Insurance,
right?
And there was hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in medical bills.
Yep.
Nobody paid.
So one of the insurance companies was saying that her domicile, which is essentially where she lived, was Ontario, Canada. If that was the case, then the other insurance company is liable to pay. The other insurance companies pointed the finger back at them, saying at the time of the accident, she was living in Canton, Michigan with her son, whose auto insurance company should have covered all her medical bills, because if she is domiciled in Canton, Michigan, then she is a resident relative of her son, and his auto insurance company is liable to pay for all those bills.
So to translate this, because
mm-hmm.
it's confusing as all hell.
Yep.
Is where she lived mattered not to us really,
right?
But it mattered to the insurance company,
right?
Because if she lived in Canada, what was it? AAA had to pay. No, Citizens had to pay. If she lived in Michigan, AAA had to pay.
Yep, that's correct.
And we don't care.
Right. But, they use that as an excuse
not to pay
for over 6 years, I think, right?
And which is horrible. Because which means this lady can't get the medical care that she needs.
Exactly.
Because the insurance companies are blaming each other.
Right. And she needed medical care. As you know, 2 major surgeries, her pelvis was shattered into pieces. Initially, one of the top doctors at the University of Michigan who teaches there had to be flown in to put together, her hip into little tiny pieces.
Like Humpty Dumpty.
Exactly. It's like having a broken piece of glass and you're trying to glue it all back together with screws and plates and
And she was in a wheelchair then.
Right,
she was an active lady. So, all right. So this, which should have been an easy case, was a mess.
Right.
Right. And it was your first case.
It was my first case.
So what did you do, Manny? Well, you made some smart decisions on this.
Yeah. So I did as much as I could for as long as I could. I think I probably worked the case for a year and a half. We went to case evaluation. So the one issue, as I mentioned, was the, pointing at each other, the order of priority issue, that we're not liable. One of the insurance companies goes a step further and says that she wasn't hit by a car, that she was crossing the street. Their driver was coming around the corner with boxes in his car. He happens to stop 2 feet in front of her, and then she falls.
Yeah. So
that was the other thing.
Just so I understand. So not only and this was Citizens Insurance Company.
Correct.
Not only were they saying the other insurer has to pay, it's not us. They literally said, oh, this old lady just happened coincidentally to just fall over in the middle of the road for no apparent reason. Did they ever say why she just suddenly fell?
They said, we don't know. She just fell.
Directly in front of a speeding vehicle.
Right.
That was found at the scene directly next to her body.
And what's even funnier, John, is that, I mean, they were essentially saying that she didn't see the car, right? Because if she saw the car and got scared and fell, they're still liable, right? And I'm sure you could explain that a lot better than I can, right? Because there doesn't have to be contact between the vehicle and her. She just has to be scared that the car's going to hit her, which caused her to fall over.
Yeah,
and she broke her hip.
This is for listeners who don't, Michigan has kind of a weird auto insurance scheme, but it's called no fault, right? And so this isn't a case about pain and suffering and all that stuff. It's just a basic case about medical bills and which insurance company has to pay the medical bills.
Right.
And under no fault, you don't have to necessarily be hit. Your injury just has to be, regardless of who's at fault, you just have to be related to a car.
That's right.
A car incident.
That's right.
So this is insane. And this was insanity. And the listeners might say, well, who the hell is going to believe that? But they hired experts.
Correct.
They hired like a Ford Motor Company, like expert engineer on biodynamics to say it was crazy.
And I don't think she even visited the scene to like do like an analysis of to make her report. That she basically agreed with them and said that, she just happened to fall without seeing the car at the exact same time and place that the car came.
And the car just was able to stop like 1 foot from her body.
Yep.
Yeah, which is crazy. And we'll get into what we found out in the case. But needless to say, this, which on the surface seemed like a really strong, easy case, turned out to be somewhat of a hornet's nest.
It was.
Especially for a first case, man.
Right. So, I had the consultant, quote unquote, helping me out for about a year and a half. Took a bunch of depositions, hired an accident reconstruction expert to come out to the scene. Like a
police reconstructionist.
Exactly. Everybody on our side was like, there's no question here that she was, one, hit by a car, and number two, that she lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario, right? So about a year and a half later, I'm just getting frustrated at this point because maybe they're just, for lack of a better word, jerking me around, right? Young new lawyer working this case.
Right.
Case evaluation comes up. I think I got like $200,000 at case evaluation.
On a multi-million-dollar case, right? And just so the listeners know, this was defended by a very big, well-known insurance defense firm.
Correct.
For Citizens Insurance.
Correct. And all the witnesses, including their own hired doctor who did an independent medical exam on this lady, on this client, he said that she was hit by a car.
Everybody's saying
that she's hit by a car, right? So at that point, I reached out through Isa. I got a hold of you.
Right? Why did you?
Because I figured, I'm like, at this point, I need to bring in a power player. I need to bring in a big gun here, right? Because my voice is not being heard. They're just trying to bury me in paperwork. They're not going to budge. They weren't there was no offer on the case. They rejected case evaluation, I believe.
Yeah.
On the first party case. So at that point I got in touch with you and then we went guns blazing, man. You obviously led it from there and then we settled the first party case back in, I think it was January 2019.
Third party
case. And so as you're aware, as soon as you got involved, because here's a little background as well. This driver, after he hit her, he went to their house to basically see how she was doing. Not only did he do that, he went to the hospital afterwards with his wife. There's a voicemail left from him to the client's son saying, I'm sorry. There's text messages exchanged.
Sorry for hitting your mom.
I'm sorry for hitting your mom.
And this is the same guy that they're using to try to say they didn't hit.
Exactly. So he basically exchanged text messages saying, I'm sorry for hitting your mom to the client's son.
He told the cops he was sorry for hitting the mom. He told the son he was sorry for hitting the mom.
Yep.
And this insurance company goes to trial in front of a jury and says, he didn't hit her?
He didn't hit her. Yeah, that was their position at trial.
I mean, it's
Straight
crazy.
face. Yep.
It's crazy.
So when you got involved initially, one of the things I remember, because what the parties had done, unfortunately, our client's son, he had deleted the WhatsApp messages. It was, communications through WhatsApp. And this is now like a few years later, right? And the driver, obviously, he deleted his messages as well. So we had a phone forensic examination done of the driver's phone, if you remember.
So what that means is, because I remember getting involved, and this is part of lawyers staying in their lane in terms of like practice areas, right?
Right.
Like if somebody came to me, like your Indian client, with like a business dispute, I'm gonna say, look, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to send this to Manny Chahal.
Right.
And it's like going, if I got a heart problem, I'm not gonna go to a foot doctor.
Exactly.
And a lot of people may think lawyers, well, they just know everything.
Yep.
We don't.
Yep.
I mean,
agree.
I know my field, you know your field.
You're right.
But it's really hard to step outside your field because it is completely different. There's different rules.
Right.
There's different techniques.
Right.
And so I remember when you called me and we got involved, and I couldn't believe that they were making such an absurd argument.
Right.
But we went to court and we got the judge to order that the driver that hit our client has to give his phone to a computer specialist, expert, who hooked the phone up to a computer and was able to download all the stuff, including deleted information.
Yeah. So what came from that was the voicemail came out. There was a voicemail to the client's son.
I'm
saying,
sorry.
Hey, we're at the hospital right now. I'm very sorry, type stuff. Text messages come out, texting his own family members. I remember a specific text message. He's like, there's an
accident.
There's an accident. I'm in shock right now.
Yeah.
And, all sorts of things. He's Googling that, like 2 or 3 days after this accident happens, he's Googling things on his Safari on his iPhone. I'm assuming it was an iPhone because it was a Safari.
Yeah,
history.
it was.
Things like, how much do you get in a personal injury lawsuit?
Yeah, I
what
think he Googled, like, what do I do if I hit someone?
Exactly. Things
so
like
this is the guy that we got this download and we blew it up for trial.
Right.
But they went to trial and said this lady just happened to fall over.
Exactly.
And this guy that hit her, who admitted to everyone that he hit her, literally was Googling, what do I do if I get into a car accident with somebody?
Yep. And if you remember, he called his insurance company to file a claim the next day.
Yeah, and he told his insurance company that he was driving and that he was in this accident.
Why would you call your insurance company if you were not in an accident?
Yeah. How many people drive down the road and just see a car accident on the side of the road and call their insurance company and file a claim for that?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And then,
looking back, it's crazy.
It's truly crazy. So if you also remember, he called the insurance company the first time. Typically, I mean, more than I do, but those conversations have to be recorded, right? And they have to be transcribed.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
the insurance company almost always records the calls,
right?
So they can show it later.
Right. So he has this conversation, the first one apparently, because we extracted his phone log to see that he called his insurance company like 2 days after this accident happens. No recording of that, nothing, no record.
Nobody
of that
ever
phone call,
explained
right?
where the recording was, right?
But then 3 days or 4 days later, again, there's a recorded phone call in which he basically says, I was driving around the corner. I stopped my car. This lady basically fell in front of me.
So he changed his story. He changed his story. And after Googling, what do I do if I get into a car accident? And how much money can I be forced to pay if I get into a car accident and all this stuff?
Exactly.
But see, that's the thing. That's going the extra mile, right? Because people may say, well, this is a crazy defense. But, I mean, they had found people to say that this happened, even though everyone at the scene knew what happened, even though the cop would testify that he admitted that he hit her.
Right.
They had changed their story.
The biggest witness in this case, I think, for us was the investigating police officer, right? The officer from Canton, who's now like a lieutenant. He came to trial and he said, well, initially at his deposition, I got him to admit that the driver told him that he struck her. Yeah. And that's why he gave him a hazardous
he wrote him a ticket. He wrote him a ticket for hitting a lady.
Right. So now, after his second phone call, if you remember, to the insurance company where he says he didn't hit her, he calls the police station back to try and change his statement that he gave, right, to get the ticket. And the officer told him,
you can't do that.
You can't do that. If you truly want to change your statement, come to the police department, sign an affidavit saying that you incorrectly said that you hit her at the scene, and now you want to change your story. But he didn't do that. And why wouldn't he do that?
Because you could go to jail if you lie to the police.
There you go.
So that was, this was a crazy case because it was kind of a crazy defense. We say case has gone wild. This is defense has gone wild, right?
Right.
They blame this poor old lady who is catastrophically injured, has been left in limbo for 6 years without her medical bills being paid.
Right.
And the insurance companies are blaming each other. And then Citizens Insurance comes in and says, oh yeah, she just happened to fall over in front of a car.
Right.
Even though everyone at the scene knew that she got hit. She had blood coming out of her nose. She said, I got hit by a car. She felt the car hit her. He said she got hit so hard she flew out of her shoes.
She did.
And what? She just fell? Who the hell falls out of their shoes? I mean, remember we got their shoes at trial and we showed the jury who the hell falls out of their shoes and flies feet in the air.
And these are like tight Sketcher slip-ons that they didn't have laces, but they were tight Sketcher type slip-on walking
it's offensive.
Shoes. It's offensive.
And this poor old lady was left in the crossfire of this. Right. And so let's tell the listeners. So what happened? I mean, this case should have settled. It never did. And we had to go to a trial.
Right. So the third party case, right? The pain and suffering case
against the driver
is initially what we started going at and attacking first. Right.
And so what that means is for pain and suffering, we sued the other driver.
Right. Right. So the non-medical bills portion of the case for her pain and suffering. Right. So we went after the driver's insurance company, and that's when you got involved in the forensic phone examination, and you just did what you do, right? You built up the case from there, picked up from where I left off, I guess. And then together, right, we settled that case.
Yeah.
For over
a lot of money. For a lot of money. That we can't say, but a lot.
Right.
And this, I think, Manny, you had the courage to do what some lawyers, it's hard to say, I don't know everything.
Right. Absolutely.
But you said, you know what, like, I think it's in my client's best interest on a case like this to bring in another attorney who specializes in this field.
Absolutely.
Which takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And I mean, it takes part of your fee, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other way I look at it as well, which I think may have been beneficial for us, it was like the bait and switch, right? They think they're dealing with a young new attorney who's just, working this personal injury case. And then at the 11th hour, I bring in the biggest gun available, right? In the Detroit area, which is Jon Marko. And so now you're involved and they're just scared. Yeah. Is my assumption. They're scared. Because I think if you took this case on day one, right, it would have probably settled a lot quicker, right? It would have settled.
We probably wouldn't have gotten a big verdict.
Exactly. But you're right. It did take a lot of courage. I mean, obviously, who wants to... I had thousands of hours into this case already, right? And to basically hand it off to you and, share a fee with you on it, right? That took some courage, but it's in the client's best interest.
It's in the client's best interest. And I think in the end, I mean, with the results that we got, it more than made up for it. I mean,
absolutely. So, absolutely.
And I've been doing a lot of, because this is my specialty on being brought into cases, sometimes right before trial, sometimes in the middle, whatever. And we were able to do a lot on this case. So we settled that, and then we went to trial against the insurance company. It was kind of a wacky trial because it's us on one side with this crippled old lady in a wheelchair who couldn't even come to trial every day. We had to wheel her in. Mm-hmm. Your fiance, would have to get her from the car, put her in a wheelchair, wheel her up to the courthouse.
Right.
And then the defendants was 2 insurance companies.
Right.
Not one, it was 2.
Yep.
And they were blaming each other. And one of them, AAA, I got to give them credit, even though they could have latched on to this crazy defense of this old lady just fell over, they wouldn't even sink that low.
No, they did not sink that low. And all due respect to them, they in fact paid some of her medical bills at the very beginning. I think their claims adjuster, if you remember, came to trial. She testified that, we're going to try as best as we can and we're going to pay your bills. We'll figure out who's liable for what, down the road.
Yeah.
But for now, it's important that this lady gets medical care, right? Because it's
to save her life.
It's a catastrophic injury, right? But eventually they had to stop paying because they realized that they were not liable.
Yeah.
Citizens not only said they weren't liable, again, they ran the whole thing that she just fell. And attorneys came into this trial and the jury saw right through it, I think, and they're just like, you're lying.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are lying.
Lying again and again. Yeah. And look, lying's a strong word, but they were lying.
Yep.
They were lying. Now, I don't know about, so we tried this case. How long did it take? Was it about 2 weeks? Or?
Yeah, it was like a week and a half, almost
week and a half.
Yep.
And let's talk a little bit about some of the wildest parts of the trial. I know one of the wildest parts for me was, I don't know if you remember the defendant driver, so the driver of the vehicle, right? And we were going back and forth on whether we should call him, because we didn't know what he was going to say, because he had said so many things. I hit her, I didn't hit her, I don't know if I hit her, what the hell was he going to say?
Right.
And ultimately, we had subpoenaed him for trial, but we decided not to call him, right?
We had, what was it at that point? I mean, just to give the audience a little background as to witnesses and the number of witnesses here. All the treating physicians, for starters, the pain doctors, the
guy at U of M,
surgeons,
who had nothing to do with the case.
Right. Like, we had 15 or 16 witnesses. They had 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Their accident reconstructionist expert, right? The one that they hired that didn't go to the scene to even investigate.
Yeah.
And then the driver is who they ended up calling because they had nobody else.
No, well, you remember, we called her on the fly.
The driver?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're actually right.
They were sandbagging us.
Yep,
so if you remember, we decided, part of trial strategy is all about making strategic decisions that all have risk, right? And we decided, why do we need to call this driver? I didn't even know if he was going to show up, because he had no skin in the game. He wasn't going to have to pay any money.
Right.
And we were kind of hoping he would be honest about everything.
Especially because he signed an affidavit, if you remember, previously.
Yeah, he signed an affidavit that said that his car scared the lady and it caused the accident and all this stuff. And so we decided, well, what the hell do we need him for?
Right.
And sometimes when you're winning so much, don't piss the jury off by making things go longer, right?
And overkilling.
Overkilling, right?
Like, they believed us, I think, by day 2.
Yeah.
Right. After we put on 10 doctors saying, including their own, right? Their own hired doctor, including him saying that she was hit by a car.
Yeah. Their own doctor, the insurance company's own bought and paid for doctor said, yeah, of course she was hit by this car. Of course she was hit by a car. He's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. She was hit by a car. And it went so well, we actually used their doctor in our case, if you remember.
We did.
But anyway, so we subpoenaed the driver, and then we called them and said, you don't need to come to trial.
Right.
We're not going to call you. But then we appeared at trial the next day, and we were about to be done with our case, and he was there. And so the judge said, and the reason he was there was because the insurance company called him. They were playing coy with us, and they were going to try to call him as a star witness. Right. So we made a game time decision in trial. The judge said, do you have any other witnesses? And I said, what the hell? I want to call this guy myself.
Right.
Because I get to question him first, remember?
Right.
And so we called this driver, who was probably the most incredible witness of the trial. He was such a liar.
John, that was one of the, I've seen cross-examinations, but you shredded this guy. He lied over and over and over again. And at the end of it, eventually it was apparent to the jury that he was lying.
Yeah.
It was so clear that he was lying.
And we went over oh, you didn't hit her, sir? Sir, why did you line your car up with this woman? If there's a woman on the side of the road who is catastrophically injured, why would you drive your vehicle up to her her dying body
2 feet.
and park your vehicle, almost run over her.
Right. And you took a measuring tape, if you remember.
Yeah.
You're like, this is how far. It's like 2 feet is like this.
Why would you drive your car 2 feet from a body on the road?
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
And what did he say?
Just smug face, no answer.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. That's it.
I was trying to help.
Yeah.
You were going to run over her?
Yeah.
And then we showed the, that's one big thing for lawyers. Forensic phone examinations are like treasure troves because with that phone examination, we were able to show that he was Googling, what do I do if I hit somebody?
Right.
And he had no explanation for why he would Google that.
Right.
Oh, you were just surfing the web. You were bored.
No explanation.
And so, so that was good. We got a huge verdict. What was it?
It was
millions of dollars.
And, the case is still in appeal. This case, one of the insurance companies has been appealing over and over again, and they're appealing again, so obviously
they've already appealed it like 3 times before we even got to trial.
We did win. It was a unanimous jury verdict, if you remember.
Yeah.
All jurors believed us, and it was just
they saw through it.
They saw through it.
In fact, we had a couple jurors come up to us after that and say, thank you, this has been an honor and stuff, because there was we were really scared. That was an interesting issue in this trial is our client was a foreigner.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that makes it a little bit tougher. And when you're evaluating a case, we heard throughout the trial, in fact, from some of the best mediators in Michigan and best lawyers, oh, you guys are going to have a tough time. Your client doesn't speak English.
Right.
We'd have an interpreter at trial for our client, which made things a lot harder.
It did.
Don't you think?
And not just that trial, John. I mean, throughout the course of the litigation, every deposition, they deposed this poor lady like 8 times.
And we had to get a Punjabi translator.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, look, I'm not an expert on Punjabi, but Punjabi to English seems like it's a little bit mushy.
Well, for me, no. But if you don't, it's like speaking Mandarin, right? I mean, or German. For us, it's the
words don't line up exactly.
They don't. You're right. They don't. And they tried to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, they confused this old lady.
Exactly.
It was hard, but that's one thing that we had to really talk about in the beginning of the trial.
Right.
Was, look, my client doesn't speak English. Our client doesn't speak English. We're going to have to speak through a translator.
Right.
Our client's not even an American citizen. Remember, they were using that against her?
Right. She's a green card holder.
Oh, you're a green card holder. You have Ontario insurance. Why don't you go put this on Canadian insurance and stuff?
Right.
And we had to really talk to the jury about that. And, they thought, the insurance company thought that was going to help them.
They did.
And it made things harder because we had to have a translator. It's harder.
It is. And I remember one of the defense counsel just trying to, abuse this lady essentially during his questioning of her at trial.
Yeah.
And it made them look even worse.
Yeah. Well, we had some jurors who had immigrated to the United States.
Yes, we did. Yep.
And I think they were just appalled by them taking that tactic of you're a foreigner. We had a Hispanic man from Mexico.
We did.
Who had came, and we also had an Asian American who was like an engineer at GM or something.
Yep.
And they came up to us afterwards, and they felt very empowered to be part of the American justice system.
And if you remember that one gentleman, he had just gotten his citizenship, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he came up afterwards as well, and he really, applauded.
Yeah.
He applauded the
Well, that was a case gone wild. And, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come in and help on that case and to get a good result. And, I think attorneys should not be hesitant to ask for help when they need it or when it's something that's outside their bailiwick, just like I would do on certain cases that I don't do, like family law or, contracts or something like that.
It's without saying expert per se, let the experts handle.
Yeah.
Let the experts handle it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because so are you going to do another personal injury case, Manny?
You know what? Lately I know after that trial, because that was my first major trial, and the preparation alone with you, that was intense. The trial was intense.
Talk a little bit about it. Because I felt like at some point,
it's not
at
easy.
some points you were going to say, our friendship's over, I don't ever want to see you again.
Oh man,
I'm not always the easiest person.
I remember on the third party case, right before we settled like a day before that trial. We were about to go to blows, man. We were about to fight each other, right? Because it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of work. Something I haven't seen to that magnitude before. And, just motion after motion, court hearing after court hearing, and just, nonstop fighting and litigation, right? So I wasn't used to that at that point. And, the intensity with which you have to work, even if you remember during the middle of trial, we got a 10,000 page claims file that wasn't fully produced to us.
In the middle of trial.
In the middle of trial. So we spent the weekend during trial, like 12-hour days going through this claims file, right? And that's like in the middle of a trial that you've been preparing 2 months for.
Right, and you're having to prepare for these witnesses.
Yeah.
And we're having to go at night.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of people, you see it on TV and it looks almost like you walk in, man. I mean, you wake up. First of all, you're sleeping, you're thinking about the trial.
Oh, yeah.
And this, if you want to be successful as a trial lawyer, this is what you have to do. Then you wake up and I'm on the phone on the way to the courthouse with you. We were getting down to Detroit at 6:30 in the morning.
Yep.
We were having meetings. Then after the trial adjourns for the day, we're working through the night.
Yeah.
And we're going to do depositions and we're doing other stuff.
Right.
It's a harrowing experience, to say the least.
It is, but now in hindsight, once you get a result, it seems like it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right? Because to get a result like that, you really have to put in the man hours. You have to pound the rock. Otherwise, you're not going to get that type of result.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts. Absolutely.
There's no shortcuts.
So to answer your question, would I take another personal injury case? I'd probably send it to the expert.
All right. Send it my way, Mr. Manny.
You got it.
Or we'll work on it together to get another great result.
Absolutely. Because it was fun. It was fun.
It is. And you know what? We got to do something great
Yep.
for our client. I mean, after 6 years of being abused and...
Yep.
This is an innocent lady who did nothing wrong, and it might be appalling to people to hear this, but this happens all the time.
All the time.
This is not some like crazy. It's a case gone wild, but this is not an uncommon event. I mean, this was disgusting on the level that it was. But this happens all the time.
All the time.
And this lady's medical bills still haven't been paid.
No, I think they're well over. I mean, they're into the millions.
They're millions of dollars,
yeah.
And it's endangered her life.
Yep.
But we were able to get justice for her, and we got to see these appeals through. And I'm confident, and we'll make a difference in her life.
Absolutely.
And it was really nice working with you as a team. And we complemented each other, I think, in different ways. So thank you for putting your trust in me on that.
Likewise, John. Thank you.
I wish we had more time to talk about all kinds of cases gone wild. But I remember during trial, there was one of the saddest cases. I don't even know if it would be appropriate to call it cases gone wild, because I think it's so sad.
It was,
but I want to talk about it because I want people to know that there's better ways and there's help out there.
Yeah, so in the midst of this case, while
in the middle of trial.
No, it wasn't in the middle of trial. I think this was if we're talking about what we discussed recently, right? That one experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a case. It was just an experience that sometimes attorneys have, and I'm sure there's lawyers watching out there that have gone through something like this.
Or people.
I was right. So we were both at a deposition in, I think it was in Canton area. And I get a call from a young gentleman, and I'm not going to obviously disclose any names here, a young Indian gentleman who I had helped out in the past, early on in my career with something nominal. Young, good-looking kid. I think he was working as a DJ or something like that. He was studying at MSU. He had just enrolled into his first year of undergrad to complete a degree in I don't know what. So he gives me a call 2 days prior to this deposition that I'm going to get to, that we were in. So he calls me 2 days prior. He's like, I have this girlfriend that, I've been seeing for some time. And for whatever reason, it seems like she's been playing me and, just trying to take my money and spend my money and just, abusing me in a way. She called the cops on me and basically said that I raped her. And I'm like, okay. Indian kid, very cultured, migrated to the U.S. maybe when he was like 16, 17,
Oh my
maybe
God.
younger. His
So
parents
she made up this false charge
made up this complete false charge. And so at this point, nothing...
because the relationship was going south.
Exactly. So he's a college student. I'm assuming she was probably living at his place. I don't know the details. We didn't get into it that far. So I called him into my office. I consulted with him, and, he shared some information. Completely innocent kid. His parents, I remember at the time, were out of the country. And
is this Indian family, did you say?
Yeah, it's an Indian family. And
so they understand, so our listeners understand, it's very cultured. Tell us the cultural
very, very
importance.
cultured. I mean, your family's honor and the respect for your family and the community is something you uphold to the highest level possible, right? You don't do anything to embarrass or bring shame to your family. And that goes for, I think, not only just Indian cultures, just other... good households, right? I mean, as a kid, you don't do something that's going to embarrass your family or, bring shame.
But I've noticed, not to stereotype or anything, but that in the Indian family is extremely important, and it's put above almost anything else.
It is. It really is.
And you can't say that about everybody.
Right.
But I've noticed that, and it's a very strong characteristic.
It is. So he comes in, all scared and crying and, tells me what happened, right? And at this point, nothing has happened. Like no police has come to his door. He hasn't been arrested, never went to jail. This is just what he found out. He found out information, I'm assuming through her, that, she
we don't even know if she actually went to the police,
exactly,
right?
We don't. But
she could have made it up out of anger or
exactly. So he's so scared just that, of the consequences that he doesn't know what to do. And I'm trying to tell him, I'm like, first of all, if something were to happen, if she had called the cops, they would have probably showed up and arrested you already.
Yeah, taken your cell phone. They would have got a search warrant.
Right. But he's like, no, I need legal help now. I need you on retainer, whatever. I'm like, just hang tight. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. 2-3 days pass by.
Well, is this kid able to even pay for you? Like,
no,
how does it work?
So he was too scared to even tell his parents in case something happened to get money from them to pay. He's a college kid, right? I mean, he can't afford a serious defense lawyer, which I would have connected him with a colleague of mine to help him out with.
So what did you do? Did you tell him you were going to help him, even though
so fast forward 3 days later, he's texting me every day, just scared. What's going to happen to me? Can you please help me? I'm like, nothing's happened yet. Just relax, dude. So fast forward, it was a weekday evening. We're in a deposition with one of the physicians on the case that we just talked about, right? And we're in this deposition. I'm getting text messages from him. And I'm like, listen, dude, if anything happens, you have my cell number. Don't worry about the money. The money is not an issue. I'm not going to charge you for anything, right? Or whoever helps you is not going to charge you. I'm going to make sure.
Because you felt really bad for this kid.
Right? I'm like, it's just calm down. So that evening, we leave the deposition at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. My last text to him was probably the text saying that I'll help you for free, was probably around like 8 p.m. I get home in the evening and I log into Facebook, and all I see is rest in peace, individual's name all over Facebook.
What are you talking about?
He committed suicide on campus. He got a gun in his car. He sat there and he shot himself in the mouth.
Dude,
that's what happened
horrible.
to him.
That's horrible.
No.
He hadn't even been charged yet.
Yeah, he had not been charged yet.
And we don't even know what would have happened to him.
Exactly.
It's such a sad.
I know there's attorneys out there that have gone through experiences like that.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really necessarily a case gone wild, but it's just an unfortunate story. And sometimes as attorneys, you deal with stuff like that. And I felt guilty for a few days, right? Like I felt not a few days. I mean, I felt guilty for quite some time. I was in shock.
It's really hard. And, but you do what you can do. But I think maybe a lesson out there of this horrible tragedy is as grim as things seem, as hopeless as they seem, whether, you're like this client who's facing a false charge of horrible rape. I mean, I can't think of a worse charge. I mean, it's worse than murder.
Right.
I mean, in a way. Or whether, you're like our Indian family who don't know how they're going to pay their medical bills because they're being cheated by the insurance company, or any of the other sad things that we deal with. Because let's face it, When you and I get phone calls, it's not because something great's happening.
Exactly.
It's because there's a tragedy.
Right.
Because somebody's going through something horrible because they need help and they don't know where else to turn. There's still hope, and we can give
always
you hope.
And there's resources out there. I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's resources out there. There's people out there willing to help.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just go that extreme with it that quickly.
Yeah, it's not always
Right.
easy,
Right.
and it's not always going to be easy.
Right.
But that's what we're here for.
That's
we're
what we're
here
here for.
as lawyers to help you get through these difficult times, whether it's, charges, criminal issues, family issues, horrible accidents,
Yep.
or horrible things. I mean, we're kind of dealers in pain and try to help and try to get the justice or put people's lives back together again.
Absolutely.
Which is not easy. And we talk a lot about on this show about, our victories and the joy but there's also a lot of sadness,
that one as
man.
a defeat. I took that one as a defeat for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's like he hadn't been charged.
It's a sad, sobering note to end the show on,
Yeah.
Manny, but I think it's an important one. Don't give up,
Don't give up.
And call, keep calling, keep trying, and we'll make sure we get you to somebody who can help you if we can't do it ourselves.
Absolutely.
There's always hope. So
You're right.
Manny, thanks a lot for being on the show of Cases Gone Wild, man. It's always a pleasure to see you, my man.
Thanks for having me, and I'll see you in Kansas City.
Yeah, we'll be in Kansas City for the Lions opener. Let's go Lions this year.
Let's go Lions.
Come on, maybe it's the year. We'll see what happens.
Yep. I'll see you in Kansas City, John. Thanks again for the opportunity, man. It was great.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. Everyone, I want to thank you. I'm Jon Marko, and thank you for listening to our podcast today on Cases Gone Wild with Mr. Manny Chahal. This is brought to you by Marko Law. If you or a loved one need help, you heard some of the stories today, whether it's an auto accident or anything, any tragedy that you need a lawyer to help you get through, please call us. We will help you, or we will help get you to someone who can. But don't give up hope. Go to our website, which is markolaw.com. That's markolaw.com, or give us a call, 313-777-7-LAW. Until next time, this is Jon Marko on Cases Gone Wild.